Shalhevet Schwartz, and this is Gefet on Daf Yomi, a joint project of Hadran and Yeshivat Drisha. We are in Masechet Avodah Zarah on Daf Mem Tet, and the topic that we'll be exploring today is the halachic principle or mechanism of zev Gorem, right, of an effect um, that has two different causes. One of those causes is issur for some reason, right, is problematic, and the other is mutar. So what is the story there? How do we treat the effect as an effect of two? Do we say that because the thing would have happened anyway without the issur's contribution, that what happened is okay, or not, and why? How do we see the ways that those two different causes or factors or contributions contribute together? What we're going to look at is a machloket Rashi Tosafot in our sugya about grafting trees, machloket, and how to read a particular case that leads into a broader machloket about the status of or about the nature of zev Gorem and how it works. And for those who have patience to stick with us until the end, we will see that this kind of dovetails within a larger, more interesting conversation about issur and heter and kind of the status of objects in our world. So let's get started. We're going to get started with the Mishnah on the previous Amud on Daf Mem Chet Amud Bet. We're dealing with the Asherah and the issur hana'ah from an Asherah tree. How do we kind of avoid benefiting from a tree that is a issur b'hana'ah? So, and what are the different kinds of ways that might come, right, that we might fall into problems there. So the Mishnah reads, Zorin tachta hayarakot b'mod hageshamim avalo b'mod hachama. One can plant vegetables under an asherah tree in the wintertime, but not in the summertime. Why? What's our concern? Our concern is that the shade from the asherah tree will help the cultivation of these plants, and therefore that will be deriving some kind of benefit from the asherah tree. Apparently the vegetables only really need the shade in the summertime and not in the wintertime, so it's okay in the wintertime, but not in the summer. But chazirin, right, different kinds of vegetables, leafier vegetables, presumably they're more sensitive to sunlight. And even the sun in even the winter sun is too strong for them. Even the shade in the wintertime is beneficial, and therefore the planting under an asherah tree would be problematic no matter what time of year. Now we get to the interesting part, which is Rabbi Yossi is cholek on the position of Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and he says, no, vegetables are a problem both in the wintertime and in the summertime. Rabbi Yossi Omer af lo yirakot b'mod hageshamim. Why? Right? What's the problem? The problem is that there are going to be these dry leaves that fall off of the tree, and they contribute to kind of to serve as fertilizer for these plants, right? And because they're fertilizing these plants, they're helping the production of this plant. And that too is a problem, right? That this issur hana'ah from this tree is contributing to the production of this plant. Now, the Gemara, as we will see, will take this as an indication that Rabbi Yossi seems to think that zev Gorem is issur, that an effect that is kind of or a product of two different causes, one being issur and one being mutar, right? That's still a problem. What are the two causes that are operating here? Right? What is the zevel? What is the fertilizer for this plant? The fertilizer is both coming from these trees, right? The dead leaves from this tree, and it's just the dirt in general is serving as fertilizer. So the Gemara is going to take this as Rabbi Yossi saying it doesn't matter that there's also dirt and that the plant would have been fertilized anyway. The fact that the fertilization is being right, that these dead leaves are contributing to the fertilization, that in and of itself is a problem. Now, the Gemara and the sugya, if for those following along in Daf Yomi, the sugya is going to have questions about how about locating those positions as the positions of attributing them to Rabbi Yossi versus Tanakama, right? It's going to seem from other sources that Rabbi Yossi actually thinks the opposite, and the Gemara is going to end up flipping the shitot. We're not going to really get into that now, but we're going to look at one of the proofs that the Gemara brings, a different breita in the name of Rabbi Yossi, as a window into some questions about the nature of zev Gorem, right? And we're going to look at this breita that the Gemara brings on the next daf as a proof that maybe Rabbi Yossi actually thinks, hey, zev Gorem is not right. Zev Gorem is not issur. Maybe it's mutar. And what Rabbi Yossi is going to be talking about here are cases of of saplings or shoots or products of orla of fruits that have been planted um within the past 3 years and are asurim bahana. So the Gemara, right, brings this brighter. Rabbi Yossi Omer notin yichor shalala ve'ein notin agoz shalala mipnei shehu pri. Rabbi Yossi says that you can plant the kind of shoot of an orla, right, of a tree that's within its first couple of years, right. You can plant the shoot, that's fine. But ein notin agoz shalala, you can't plant a nut of orla. Why? Because the nut is considered to be a tree. The nut is considered to be a fruit. Fruits of an orla tree, right, a tree within its first 3 years, its fruits are asurim bahana. After that year, then you get netarva, and then after that, the fruits are mutarim, the fruits are permitted, but within those first three years, they're asurim b'hana'ah, you can't plant them. Shoots are okay to plant. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, but then Rav later is kind of commenting on this position of Rabbi Yossi that Mode Rabbi Yossi she'im nata v'hivrich v'yirkiv mutar. Rash, a heads up that nata v'hivrich v'yirkiv, what exactly the case that Rav is talking about here is not totally clear, and Rashi and Tosafot are going to have different understandings of what that case is referring to. But it seems like in that case of nata v'hivrich v'yirkiv, there's some kind of grafting going on. Let's put it that way. There's some kind of havracha v'harkava. That Rabbi Yossi would admit that in that case it's fine, right? Even though you're not a notin egos shalor la, right? You can't plant this egos shalor la. There's something that there's going to be some case of natavi hivrich v'yarkiv in which even Rabbi Yossi thinks, right, that it's okay. V'tanya nami hachi, and the Gemara also brings a bright that says Mode Rabbi Yossi sheim natavi hivrich v'yarkiv mutar. And the Gemara is going to bring this as proof that Rabbi Yossi thinks that zev gorem is mutar, which is to say that natav hivrich v'yarkiv is the zev gorem that the Gemara is talking about. There's some kind of grafting situation that happens with with orla that is going to, according to Rabbi Yossi, be okay. Now, let's start with Rashi. Rashi's explanation of what this case is referring to. Im hivrich o hirkiv yichor shel ola be'ilan zaken mutarim perotehen miyad af al pi shelo mil'u lahem shnei ola dezev zegorim mutar. So Rashi's first explanation, Rashi is going to give us two different readings. This is going to be the one that he prefers, right? What we're talking about is we take a shoot from a tree that is within its first 3 years of life, meaning this tree, its fruits right now are asurim b'hana'ah. You take a shoot from that tree, right, and you graft it onto an older tree. I graft it onto a tree that has been existed already for plenty of years, and its fruits are mutarim b'hana'ah. Now, what happens to future fruits of that tree that grow, right? According to Rashi's understanding of Rabbi Yossi, those fruits are going to be permitted immediately. Even though, let's say, a fruit grows on this shoot that I took from the 2-year-old tree, right? And a fruit grows within the next 6 months. So even though we're still within the first 3 years of that shoot's life, what this has now become has become a case of zev zegorim. It's become a case where there were two different kind of contributors to the production of this fruit. What were the two contributors? The shoot from the orla tree and the older tree. So one is the gorem to issur and one is the gorem to heter, right? And therefore, and because zev zegorim mutar, right? This fruit is going to be permitted immediately, even within the first 3 years of that other tree's life. And so to we say more generally that right, that it's not a real girl. We're talking about our older and newer trees. This is also about an orla case, an orla vine that gets intertangled with an older vine, right? That it is batel. So Rashi's already given, right? It is nullified to, right, relative to the older vines that it was mixed up in. So Rashi's already here giving us a little bit of a hint into the kind of halachic mechanism that's at work here in zev zegorim, right? The word in the case that he refers us to is betela, bitul, right? What's going on here, and this shita hinted to in Rashi, and it is kind of further explicated in the explanation of the Ran, that what's going on here is bitul, is nullification essentially of the issur in the heter. And that's why, according to Rabbi Yossi here, zev zegorim is mutar. That is explanation number one. Okay, now Rash is going to give us his second explanation. What is this case of natavi vrich v'hir kiv? According to the second explanation, lashon acher im nataha agos shel orla shehu isur hana'a. Right, let's say I take this nut, right, this nut that I said, Rabbi Yossi said you can plant the shoot, but you can't plant the nut. So let's say I take the nut and I plant it. I do the thing that I'm not supposed to do. Ulich sheyigadel v'na'asa natiya hivricha v'hir kiva b'ilan deheter. Right. But when it get right, when that nut that I planted, right there, or that seed that I planted gets the pit that I planted gets becomes uh starts growing and becomes its own sapling, and I take that sapling, and that is what I put onto this other older tree. Right. So Rashi has sort of added a step. Right. It's not that I took a shoot from the 2-year-old tree. I took a shoot from the tree that was the result of the planting of issur. Right. I took a tree. And right then it's mutar, right? To otan perut sheto'en achar zman, right? Because um, whatever fruit it's going to grow in the future, but inami alidei ha'ilan shalater. They're also right. We end up with a similar situation, which there's this grafted tree, um, and there's right, but there it's not a matter of new tree and old tree, but it's a matter of mutar tree and asur tree. Not asur because it's old, but asur because it was planted from something that was orla, that was isur b'hana'a. Right, so that's going to be the explanation number two of Rashi, right? That there was this extra step where I planted the thing that I wasn't supposed to plant, and now my new tree is asur b'hana'a entirely. But what's Rashi going to say? V'kashali below hivrichu below hirkiv nami ikazev zegorim. Right, it goes to isur v'karka deheter. Rashi doesn't like this second explanation. Why? Because he's like, whoa, wait, if that's what we're talking about, if we're talking about the result of something that I planted and it then grew, I could skip the whole grafting thing. Why? Because sure, I wasn't allowed to plant the seed from the 2-year-old tree. But once I did, right, what did I end up with? I ended up with something that was already mutar. Why? Because there was zev zegorim. There were two different right contributing factors to this new sapling. One was the agos that was asur, and but also what else contributed to the growth of that tree? The karka that was heter, right? The ground, which was mutar, and that's already zev zegorim. So I could skip the grafting. So it's not a good explanation for me to say, right, that there was this extra step. Once there was this extra step, I didn't even need the grafting. So what must it have been? It must have been that I actually took the shoot from the 2-year-old tree and shoved it onto, and grafted it onto that older tree. That's Rashi's second explanation and his reason, right, and his challenge or his rejection of the second explanation. Now, Tosafot is going to come in and as Darkam Kodesh, right, as they do, right, Tosafot are going to adopt, right, are going to respond to this objection of Rashi. They're going to adopt Rashi's second explanation and reject the first, explain why they don't like the first, and why Rashi's challenge to the second explanation is not actually a good challenge. So Tosafot on Machil im nata v'hivrich. What Tosafot say? Pirish b'kuncheris b'lashon acharon. Right, Rashi's second explanation, nata it goes v'acharkach shena asana siyah hivrich v'yirkiv ba'ilan shel heter oto lashon ikar. Right, Rashi's second explanation, that one's right. Why? Umashi iksha b'kuncheris. What Rashi's challenge, which was that afilu lo hivrich v'yirkiv nami. Right, that challenge if I planted it, the kind of immediate result would already be mutar because sure there was the seed that was asur, but there was also the ground. Lo dak. Tosfot doesn't like that challenge. It doesn't count as zev zegorim unless the two different causes are playing the same role. Right? We have two different types of fertilizer, the ground and the dead leaves. Sure, that's zev zegorim, but the seed and the ground, yeah, sure, they both contribute to the production of a plant, but that's not zev zegorim. That's just the world. Right? Every result that happens in the world is the effect of a number of different causes. All right. It only counts as zev ela right kshev shnehem me'inyan echad. Kemo havrachat issur be'ilan heter. Right. If I actually graft if I actually graft and I take a branch, I have a branch of issur and a branch of heter, and the branches themselves are playing the same role for the production of the fruit. Sheshnehem ilan. Both of them are branches, or both of them are the tree. Right? And yeah, sure, the fertilizer of the dead leaves and the fertilizer of the ground, sure, those are two gormim, right? That of above. It goes v'karka shnei inyanim. But the pit or the nut and that and the ground, those are two totally separate things. So according to Tosafot, zev Gorem, right, is only counts when right, or is only considered to be zev Gorem when those two causes are actually playing identical roles. Umash Piresh Bilshon Rishon, right now, Tosfot has to explain why Rashi's first explanation doesn't work. Masha Piresh Bilshon Rishon, Hivrichi Horshel Ilan, right? If I actually take the 2-year-old tree and I graft it onto, take a shoot from the 2-year-old tree and graft it onto the older tree, the Have Kmo Yaldat, right? Yaldas, right? Hispicha Vizkenash, Dibitela, right? Um, right, that Rashi compares to the case of the entangled vines of Orla, right? In Hanidon to Melaraya. There, the proof is not like it. Right, those two things are his proof is not similar to the case that we were talking about. Why? Tehahi, right? Because what's going on there with Yildah, right? With the intertangled vines, that's bitul. What's zev zegorim? It's not bitul. What's he going to say? Tehahi afilu lemanda amar zev zegorim asur mutar. There, with the intertangled vines, right? Even according to the opinion that zev zegorim asur, that would still be mutar. Everyone holds a bitul. That's just a case of bitul. You can drop a drop of milk in your pot of chicken soup and it's batel, even if you think that zev is zegure masor. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is not a case of bittul. Kevan shebatla baskena became right became mashma b'lashon batla. Right there, what we're talking about is bittul. That and which has no relation to two contributing causes. There you have two different items that are mixed up in each other, right? The issur and the mutar, and we say that the issur is nullified according to certain kinds of principles, rove, shishim, right, no tam, whatever it is, depending on the case. But that's not what's going on here. It's not like I took an orla fruit and got it mixed up with 50 non-orla fruits. What happens is I had two different, right, I had an orla branch and a non-orla branch that both together contributed to um, the the production of this right of this new item. So right, he rejects Rashi's explanation because right the mechanism of bittul that's agreed upon by anyone. It has nothing to do with the machloket about zev zegorim. So right, just let's make some seder here about this machloket Rashi Tosfot. Right, um, right. We know that Rabbi Yossi is moda about this case of natavi hivrich v'hirkiv. Right, and what are the two different explanations of what exactly that case is referring to? Right, option number one, you attach the orla shoots to the older tree. And the question that we're asking is whether or not those fruits are permitted now within the first 3 years, or will they only become permissible after the 3 years of the original orla tree? That's explanation number one. Explanation number two is going to be taking when we actually planted the orla fruit and there which was asur b'hana'ah, did something asur b'hana'ah, and get the result, which is right now this new shoot, and we take that shoot and put it into another tree, right? Right, are those fruits going to become permitted? Right? Do we take right 3 years and those become permitted after or will they be forbidden forever? Because what we're talking about is the growth, right? The result of an issur hana'ah that was an issur hana'ah. Um, and right, the zev zegorim, the factor or the contributor that dominates is the issur hana'ah that you planted. Those are right the two explanations, right? How do those just a quick textual point about right how do each of those explanations of the case of Natavi Virkiv relate to the previous line in the Breita? So if you see those two lines on the top, right, what Rabbi Yossi, according to the first explanation, right, if I took the shoot from the orla tree and attach it to a new tree, it really has nothing to do with what Rabbi Yossi just said about right. Rabbi Yossi said a notin ego right egos shalorla. You can't do that because it's a pre. And then you can graft the shoot, and that's fine. So really, there isn't a relation. There isn't so much of a close relationship between those two different parts of the Breita. Whereas, according to Rashi's second explanation, or which Tosfot prefers, right? Rabbi Yossi says, yeah, you can't plant the nut, you can't plant the pit, but if you do, and then you take that and graft it onto another tree, right? That's fine. And right, so according Tosfot's explanation is going to link between those two different parts of the Breita. Um, that right but now right we have these two different understandings of the Breita. And we're still on some level left with on a kind of on a conceptual question about um, what really is this Gorem Laheter, right? How does it work? How does the Zevazeh Gorem, right? Why should it be that, right? According to, and Rashi already gave us a hint into it, but what is the mechanism here and how is it working? And right, why would it be that if Zevazeh Gorem Mutar that for some reason the issur Hana'ah here is not sufficient, right? Does not have the power to render its result also prohibited. Um, what we see in Rashi, right, is the mechanism of bitul, right? The oral fruits are betilim to the fruits of the older tree. Zef is right? Um, um, and Zev Zegorim is kind of functions or operates even when right, we have two different kinds of causes because right there's this principle of bitul at work here. Tosfot, on the other hand, they're giving us a picture where we have two different causes that are have sort of equal weight and equal roles. They play kind of the same role, but it's not, and right, the word we're going to kind of use here is detachment. There's some way in which the result or the effect of that cause is removed from or detached from the issur that contributed to it. But Tosfot doesn't exactly explain why. Um, right, what is it about the fact that there was this other cause? Maybe it was right, maybe it's the fact that the dependency wasn't there because there was this other cause that was also contributing. It was right, this new product wasn't dependent on the issur and is therefore detached from it. But it's not through the right, but it's not through the mechanism isn't one of nullification or a bitul, it's one of on some level detachment. Um, and just also kind of to which kinds of causes matter or which kinds of causes can contribute to do we care about when it comes to Zev Zegorim? So according to Rashi, right, according to Rashi's Kushya, right, there would be Zev Zegorim, right, even if you just planted planted the nut because of the ground and right the ground and the ground also having been a contributing cause. Right, whereas for Tosfot, no, it doesn't count as Zev Zegorim unless the two causes um, are identical and are playing identical roles. Right for Rashi, right when there are two causes, then the issur is batel to the heter, and it's relevant to all cases in which two different causes are operating at once. Right, if one of the causes is permitted and one of the causes is prohibited, the issur is batel to the heter. Whereas for Tosfot, right, where what's happening is we ignore the Gorem to issur, we only ignore the Gorem to issur, the assur cause, when we have also a mutar cause playing an identical role. Um, and just in terms of the legal language that they're each using, right? Rashi is using a familiar legal language, right? He's using familiar kind of concept, the concept of bitul, which we know from all over Shas, whereas Tosfot, the legal mechanism is a little bit more unclear, right? It seems to be that the issur doesn't have the power to issur, it doesn't have the power to actually prohibit its effect. It's able to be detached in some way, but we don't have a clear picture necessarily of what that contribution is. Um, now we're going to do a little bit of a zoom in to Shitat Rashi, to this Shita that it's Bitul, and we're going to see a couple of different a couple of different later Parshanim trying to understand exactly right what Rashi or what it could mean that that Zevazegorim works kind of operates as a form of Bitul and what would be the ramifications of taking that understanding of that really being the legal mechanism here. So um, we're going to start with the Magen Avraham commentary on the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch here, who has a question about Shitat Rashi, and ultimately right is going to make a pretty significant caveat based on Rashi's understanding of Zev Zegorim. I'm just going to read what's in yellow here where the Magen Avraham says, "Well, behekdesh afilu be'elef lo batil asur." Right, we have zev zegorim, and we know that the issur is batel to the heter, is nullified to the heter, but there are going to be certain circumstances, the Magen Avraham says, in which that doesn't work. What are those circumstances going to be? Those are going to be all the cases in which, in general, bitul doesn't work. Right, for example, hekdesh. Hekdesh isn't batel, right? There are some other examples, right? Davar sheish bo motirin isn't batel, right? In general, right, you need a rove to be batel. So what the Magen Avraham is going to say here is the zev zegorim, right? If the mechanism here is bitul, it's going to work according to all of the rules of bitul, and therefore they're going to be right? If one of my gormim is hekdesh, right, not batel. So zev gorim in a case of hekdesh is going to be asur, even though in general zev gorim is going to be mutar. Presumably, you would write you would need a rof, right? Like if right, the Magen Avraham is taking Rashi's shita to its logical conclusion. If this is bitul, then it's bitul, and it works according to all the rules of bitul. Problem is that we don't see any reference to that in the sugya, and that it's not totally clear with Zev Zegorim, right? I guess with the grafting of a tree, it seems like there is a kind of rove, but most of the tree is this old tree, so there seems to be a rove there, but we don't we don't hear of the principles of bitul or the rules of bitul being operative in when it comes to zev gorim. And so for that reason, Rabbeinu David in commentary on Pesachim is going to actually try to draw a distinction. And he's going to say, no, zev gorim is a special kind of bitul. It is bitul. Rashi is not wrong, um, but it is not subject to all of the general rules that we know about the process of bitul. I'm starting to read from the second paragraph here. It's still white, but the hatshuva, right? Shelo timtza zehadin, right? Zehadin shel zev zegorim ela b'she'ein bahem ta'amo v'lo mamasho shel issur. So what, right? The zev zegorim is going to operate when there isn't right, the physical, the issur isn't physically present, right? And it's mamash or ta'am isn't physically present, right? We're not talking about um, a drop of milk that drops into your pot. Rather, when it's a contributing cause. And then when it's a contributing cause, the sheyesh right sham gorem acher shel heter, right she'ein kol hatikun shelo lo b'issur ela b'siyua mimenu. Right, and it's special, right, because what we're talking about is not an issur object that gets mixed up in something, but that it's a contributing factor or a contributing cause, and therefore because of that, it's not going to operate according to all the rules of bitul. We're going to see a kind of a step further in the Shari Yosher, Shimon Shkap, in Achron, who right tries to really give us an understanding of, okay, why should that matter? Why should the fact that um, why should the fact that something is the koach, right, is a contributing factor rather than its mamash going to make a difference as to whether it operates according to all the rules of bitul, as to right, and it's zev zegorim according to Reb Shimon is going to be mutar even if it's not a rove, right? Even if there's more asur than heter. Why? What's Reb Shimon going to say? Right. Aval heichal she'anu danim rak al koach hagorim. When we're talking about the right the contributing right, force the fact right the issur as a factor or as a cause rather than as something that's physically present. Um, it's going to be different. Why? And now I'm skipping to the yellow. Issur chaser adain right. Issur chaser adain right adain issur mamash. Shelo nigram tzurato ve'atzmo. Right, about the Gorem shel heter lo nechsar klum. Right, so I have a product that is the result of issur and heter. Um, according to Reb Shimon, that product, right? There's some a missing element, right? There's a missing element to the issur in that new product. What do I mean? I had something that was issur, and now um, and that issur is not present physically in this new object. It's been contributed to, but right, it's an effect, but it's not physically present there. But is that true about the heter? No, says Reb Shimon. Why? Because in general, when we think about objects in the world, when we think about the world in front of us, everything's heter. Unless there's a reason to, right, we don't have to right walk around in our lives assuming that everything's a sore unless the Torah permits it to us. No, the Torah forbids us from certain things, but in general, right, if the Torah didn't explicitly forbid it, then it's permitted. Which is to say that the heterness, right, the permittedness of this new object, there's nothing, right, nothing chaser in that. There's nothing missing in that, right? This new object would have been permitted anyway. It was just that it might have been forbidden because of that forbidden cause from it. But the forbidden cause from it, it's not physically present in it. So, right, this new object is kind of it's part issur and it's part heter, but the heterness of it is complete or is isn't missing anything because everything's heter. It's just heter like the rest of the world. Whereas the usurness of it, right, the prohibitedness of it, is missing something because it's not really there. It's just been contributed to, or it's just the effect of something. Um, So, right, if just to zoom out, how can we understand Rashi's explanation that Zev is a Gorem is a form of bitul? According to the Magen Avraham, it's bitul like all other bitul, and therefore should operate according to the same rules. Principles like rov or tavar sheish bo materin would still apply. According to Rabbeinu David, no, this is a unique form of bitul. The rules aren't the same when there isn't material issur inside the object in question. And Rabbi Shimon gives us almost like a further explanation of that. Why would it be that when there's no material issur, right, it's different? Right. Our starting point is that objects in the world are permitted, and therefore, when the issur is merely a cause and not actually present, right, it does not have, right, it doesn't have as much power relative to the heter, which is actually present. The heter is actually present everywhere. Um, and yeah, hopefully, I think that last point, Rabbi Shimon can kind of give us a broader window into maybe how we think about right our what it means to engage with the world as God fearing and Torah committed Jews. It doesn't necessarily mean that we now have to look at the world as issur um, unless we have reason to believe otherwise. But that the world is full of objects that are kind of full of things that are there and that are permitted and that are part of the world that we're meant to live in and enjoy. And yeah, sometimes there are things that are going to be prohibited from us, but that on some level, what is permitted is stronger at its core than what is prohibited. So thank you so much and have a great week.